Our noisy outer world is but a reflection of the noise inside, our incessant need to be occupied, to be doing something. Tenzin Palmo, Into the Heart of Life. Have you ever tried to take back control of the volume in your life? Do you think your inner voice has a volume dial? Have you ever tried to adjust it? Would you like to find new, quieter spaces? And what would you use them for? What would you create? These are just a few of the questions we'll explore in this week's essay. Enjoy. Welcome to the Like a Bird podcast. I'm James Chadwick, and throughout 2024, I'll be sharing one essay a week or perhaps an interview, and then I'll be rolling all these ideas up into my second book just in time for Christmas. But why Like a Bird? Well, it all started, as it often seems to do, with a single line that I couldn't get out of my head by the French writer Paul Valéry. One should be light like a bird and not like a feather. That line felt true and important. Yes, we should all want to grow lighter and freer as we grow older, but lighter with control, like a bird in flight and not like a feather buffeted around by the wind. And so this weekly podcast and newsletter are for everyone ready to grow lighter by gently cutting themselves free from the ideas, the habits, and the people that are weighing them down. Got any of those? My guess is yes. So let's dive in to this week's idea, which is also available at jechadwick.com. In today's essay, we will explore a theme very dear to my heart. It is called Does Your Inner Voice Have a Volume Dial? How to take back control of the noise in your life and what happens after you do. I'm going to share some experiences from 10-day silent retreats, look at some of the biological causes, take us to snow-topped mountains, Quaker meetings, the Camino Way, and what Marcel Proust understood about the relationship between silence and creativity. So let's dive in. A man walks into a monastery. He takes a vow of silence and commits to speaking only 2 words every 7 years. After the first 7 years, the monks summon him and ask him to speak. Hard bed, he says. They nod and dismiss him. 7 years later, they summon him again and invite him to talk. Bad food, he whispers. The monks all nod and wave him out. 7 more years pass and they bring him back. I quit, he declares. The abbot can't control himself. Big surprise, he says. You've done nothing but complain since you got here. The longest stretches of silence I ever experienced were 10-day Vipassana retreats. For the first few days, you feel disoriented by the lack of human communication. Nobody is talking to you, and nor are you talking to others, which means you're no longer expending energy trying to interpret or perform all those endless stories. At first, you miss the human reinforcement that you do in fact exist. But after a week or so, you will likely start to enjoy this new quiet freedom. Then you start noticing a new, quieter soundtrack. There's no TV, no music, arguments, podcasts, gossip, ringtones, or keyboard tapping. Instead, there's a new background hum of birds, insects, wind, streams, leaves, and the gentle shuffle of fellow meditators as they struggle with their positions. It was always there, but you never heard it before. And now it feels like someone turned off the other soundtrack and turned the volume on this one up. Finally, on top of this soundtrack, there's a whole new noise to get used to, your own inner voice. It was always there, of course, chattering away with itself in the background, but you have become an expert at drowning it out with your playlists, screen time, and Netflix episodes. Now you have no defense. You are forced to listen to it for around 16 hours a day. But hopefully you are also learning how to observe it rather than identify with it. We start asking ourselves a new set of questions about this inner voice. What will we learn from it about ourselves? Will we be able to cope with listening to it all on our own? And how come we took so many decades to sit down and listen to it finally? What were we afraid of? And then for me at least, we start asking this weird new question, does my inner voice have a volume dial? And if so, what default is it set to? Before you read on or listen, please try to answer Yes or no? So it turns out it does, or at least mine does. I didn't know this until I noticed that my inner voice was practically shouting at me, and I could barely hear the delicious background noise of the meadow outside the room. For the first time in my life, I wondered idly whether I had a volume dial. I tried to change my inner voice to a whisper instead of full volume, a 3 instead of a 9. Unbelievably, it worked immediately, and for the rest of the retreat, I was able to observe my thoughts in a softer whisper that was far more enjoyable to listen to. It was quite a revelation. I always knew that I had the power to move to a quieter place and meditate, but I didn't know I also had volume control for my inner voice. It made me feel even more in control of my mind than before. If I hadn't stepped out of daily life to change my soundtrack, I would have never known this. It was another reminder that we can change the volume in our lives to make ourselves feel lighter. Why don't we do this more often? Well, Tenzin Palmo, the remarkable British Buddhist nun who lived for 11 years on her own in a cave in India, believes we are afraid. Here she says, we are afraid of silence, outer silence, inner silence. When there's no noise going on outside, we talk to ourselves, opinions and ideas and judgments and rehashes of what happened yesterday or during our childhood, what he said to me, what I said to him. Our fantasies, our daydreams, our hopes, our worries, our fears, there is no silence. Our noisy outer world is but a reflection of the noise inside, our incessant need to be occupied, to be doing something. Starting to listen to your own voice again feels both delicious and deeply human. You feel you were born to listen attentively to yourself, but somehow you forgot how to do it and then surrounded yourself with unnecessary noise. Biologically, this makes sense because we are human apes, just a few hundred generations from a society where the ability to listen to the signals and chatter of the jungle or the savannah would determine whether we would eat or get eaten. In fact, especially in America, even a few generations ago, people lived right on the frontier between the city and the unknown, between the noise we created and the noise from which we came. It was important to pay close attention to threats from the wilderness. I often feel this urge to go outdoors and be a listening animal. In nature, even silence seems loud, and the quieter you are, the more you can hear. One reason our family decided to move to Utah was to spend months of the year in the mountains, because the easiest place to find total silence is on a mountain, alone, while it's still snowing. I first experienced this while trekking in Nepal, and I've sought it out ever since. Whether you walk out in the backcountry or up a chairlift on a quiet day, the silence is uniquely deafening. Peter Mathiton, the enigmatic writer, Zen teacher, and one-time CIA agent, captured it beautifully in The Snow Leopard. Snow mountains, more than sea or sky, serve as a mirror to one's own true being, utterly still, utterly clear, a void, an emptiness without life or sound that carries in itself all life, all sound. If you don't have a mountain, an interesting way to explore the experience of sitting silently together might be to attend a Quaker meeting, which take place all over the world. Normally, the Religious Society of Friends, the Quakers or Friends, date back to the English Protestant movements of the 1650s and offer a very personal and quiet form of worship. Here's how they describe their meetings, which are open to all and often held at local meeting houses on Sunday mornings. A Quaker meeting is a simple gathering because Friends believe that spirit may reveal itself to anyone. We don't have priests dispensing grace to a congregation of followers. Instead, everyone arrives at the meeting house as equals, and seating is usually arranged so everyone faces each other in a square or a circle. Then, in what's known as an unprogrammed meeting, because anyone could be the instrument through which God, or spirit if you prefer, chooses to give a message, everyone sits in silence, usually for an hour, and waits to see if a message comes. For a more active, transformational experience, many people travel to France and Spain to walk the Camino Way in silence. Pilgrims travel from all over the world to silently walk the way of St. James, known in Spanish as the Camino de Santiago, the almost 500-mile path from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in France to Santiago de Compostela near the western coast of Spain. Apparently, the early pilgrims deliberately travelled slowly, forgoing the uses of river barges or horses in favour of their own feet. A pilgrimage from northern Europe to the remains of St. James in Santiago could take 8 months, with travellers leaving in the spring and returning in the winter. It's now at the very top of my bucket list, and when I walk the Camino Way, I plan to carry this poem by David Whyte, either in my backpack or my head, especially this verse: "For the road to Santiago, for the road to Santiago, don't make new declarations about what to bring and what to leave behind. Bring what you have. You are always going that way anyway. You are always going there all along." Controlling our inner volume dial also helps us with creativity. When we sit alone to create something, perhaps to paint or to write, we need to hear ourselves clearly, and silence creates an empty space that must be filled. As Aristotle understood, nature abhors a vacuum. Marcel Proust, who gave us À la recherche du temps perdu, perhaps the most intimate portrait of an inner voice in all of literature, apparently lined his walls with sound-absorbing cork, closed the drapes, and wore earplugs. He knew that great work comes from great silence. In all these ways, then, we can choose to turn down the volume and listen. We can switch off our devices, walk in silence, find snow, sit in prayer, or meditate. When we take the time to find our own volume dial and then learn to turn it right down, we regain some control over our thoughts and give ourselves the chance to hear again, and perhaps from this quieter place, even to create again. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Like a Bird. Please subscribe to get one new idea a week. Check out more creative projects at jechadwick.com and share with anyone you think might be trying to grow lighter. And have a great light week.